OverDrive final hour on this Wednesday afternoon. Aaron Korolnek in for Brian Hayes. Jamie Noodles McLennan with me for the final hour. Darren Dreger will be here in just a moment, although maybe the snow held Dregs up ahead of his big panel for Canada and Sweden. Hopefully that is not the case. And with regards to this game, there he is right there, Darren Dreger. With regards to this game, Jamie, and we'll be talking a ton about the goaltending, good or bad, right, with Jordan Binnington in goal. And I'm curious to know if you think this stat has any relevance tonight for Jordan Binnington and Team Canada. 4.05 GAA, 868 save percentage, and 4 career starts at the Bell Center. The venue, does that mean anything for goaltenders?
It does a little bit, and here's why. There's certain buildings where you're just like, you feel like really good in it. And I've talked to a lot of goaltenders, you know, whether I played with them or played against them. And you talk about, hey, Madison Square Garden, you like the lighting there. You know, the fans get you into it. You feel like you need to be on because that building gets rocking. I'll give you an example. I don't know if I ever had a good game in Detroit at the Joe Louis. I can go back throughout my career, but I'm obviously I got suspended there and all of that at the end of my career. But I can't remember if I actually went into that building and just had a good game and played well. But there were certain organizations, certain buildings, you're like, you know what, I feel pretty good. And then vice versa. So it might be a thin layer, but it might just be a coincidence that he's played there 4 times and it just been on a back-to-back or whatever. And but it might factor in a little bit. Like I say, all eyes are on this guy. And you know, I like that he plays with a little bit of confidence, like not a little bit, a lot of confidence and swagger and chip. He'll be able to handle it. Even if things go poorly tonight, I feel like he'd be the type of guy like Connor Hellebuck. Connor Hellebuck, you know, lost against Colorado and he was giving up 7 and it looked ugly. And in his year-end media, he was like, you guys aren't going to believe this, but I felt amazing in the playoffs. Where you're like, okay, well, that didn't look amazing. To me, Binnington's got a little bit of that, so we'll see how it unfolds here tonight.
TSN hockey insider Darren Dreger is with us. Darren, good evening. How are you?
I'm doing okay. How about you guys?
I think I'm doing well. I know Noodles as well. Where is your level of confidence in Canada's goaltending tonight?
It's fine. It's fine. I mean, you know, if we're going to make the comparisons to some of the very good goalies in this event, it's a challenge. But, you know, I mean, you're looking at Stanley Cup champions in Adin Hill and Jordan Binnington. And I thought it was interesting yesterday in listening to John Cooper and, you know, his address to the media talking about the fire in the belly of Jordan Binnington. And, you know, I hope that translates into him doing absolutely everything to keep the puck out of the net. I mean, that's what it boils down to. I mean, you're not going to have 2 goalies square off at the Four Nations face-off. So, you're rolling the dice here a little bit. But doesn't it feel like, with all due respect to the Swedes here, if that lineup representing Team Canada can't outscore Sweden, then we shouldn't be talking about goaltending. This guy is going to let pucks in from center ice. I mean, let's give Jordan Binnington a little bit of credit here. He's certainly more than capable. So I don't have a high level of concern.
Go ahead, Noodles.
No, I was just going to say, like, my biggest thing, Dregs, is, and I've said it all along, Binnington doesn't have to win them the tournament, but he does. He can't lose them the tournament. He can't be to a point where it's like, we just can't get a save, or now your team has to change a little bit because you don't trust what's going on there. That's my biggest concern. Yeah. But, and all of this too, Dregs, you can't sleep on Sweden. No. You can't sleep on Finland. Like, I know on paper they might be slight underdogs or maybe gross underdogs depending on who you talk to. Mm-hmm. There's some great players on that other side, and if you sleep on them, they're going to make you pay.
Yeah. I mean, the goaltending there might be more than adequate. Again, you run into a hot goaltender, aside from the guys that we're earmarking going into this event, like Hellebuck, you're going to have a problem. And Sweden has 2 capable guys there, right? Gustafsson and Linus Ullmark. You know, I think that there's some compelling stories. You know, what is William Nylander going to do in that uniform? Again, you know that he's capable of being that game breaker. Elias Pettersson of the Vancouver Canucks.
Oh, yeah.
No one has more riding on the outcome of his individual game and Team Sweden than Pettersson does in terms of the bigger picture and longer term. And if Rick Tocchet, who's on the Canadian bench, is cheering for one guy outside of Canada, that's the guy he's cheering for. Because when you think of it, he's had a brutal year to this point. It's been draped in all kinds of drama and turmoil, right? But what if he's an impactful piece to Sweden and they upset Canada and they go deeper in this event than most of us expect? Can that motivate him? Can that kind of flip his season around going into the final leg for the Vancouver Canucks in the playoffs? And, that's kind of a sidebar story, obviously, going in, but this Swedish team is capable for sure.
Darren Dreger with us, Canada, Sweden, 8 p.m. tonight. The thing about this tournament that I think a lot of people might not be grasping is just how short it is. This tournament ends next Thursday. It's 8 days. It is quick. And that's why I think coaching is so important in this tournament, in that the coaches who make the correct moves at the right time in the middle of a game, I think in-game management is going to be so huge, because if you have a couple lines that aren't going for 2 periods and you just keep sticking with them, and they don't do anything for you, all of a sudden you could lose a game in regulation and force your hand to the next game where, okay, this is pretty much must win, especially for Canada, right? Like if they don't get points tonight, you're looking at the game on Saturday against the Americans, who are obviously just as good as Canada, very close.
You can't oversell the importance of this opening game for Canada.
For sure.
Can't. I mean, they lose to the Swedes, and all of a sudden Saturday's game against the Americans gets ugly in a hurry, because you go into see you later, thanks for coming. I mean, and nobody is expecting that, but that's, again, the essence of what this short event is all about. I'm not so sure. Coaching is always going to be a factor, and you're right, in-game bench management is key, but how knee-jerk can you be? I mean, if you're looking at the line tonight, and we're all fascinated by Nate McKinnon, Sidney Crosby, and Mark Stone with Crosby on the wing, right? Okay, so maybe they don't get going as quickly as you hope. Well, are you shaking that line up in the third period? I don't know. Probably not. The one takeaway, and it's pretty obvious, is this isn't your standard international event, right? So there hasn't been a whole lot of opportunity to work on things. They had 2 practices, and a large part of the focus was on special teams. You're not talking about structures. And I thought Pierre LeBrun made an interesting point in his conversation with Brad Marchand, who said you're going to see players huddle a lot before faceoffs on the ice. And it's just simple conversation and communication off the draw. Where do you need me to be? It's not hockey 101. Certain guys taking faceoffs want their wingers to be in a set position. Well, that's structure and that's detail work that you haven't had time to work on. So you've got to have those conversations leading up to it. So I think you're talking about 23 different coaches here.
Well, the one thing too, Dregs, you just mentioned his name. So for the last 2 hours, we've been talking about guys who maybe haven't had the best seasons, individually. And I was pointing to Erik Karlsson. I was looking at Mika Zibanejad. You just mentioned Pettersson from Vancouver. How about Brad Marchand? I mean, he hasn't had a great season. Boston's on the outside looking in. Maybe something like this brings his level up to the point where he goes back to his team and becomes, a different player here down the stretch. That's kind of what, same thing, McAvoy coming off an injury. You've got some guys who haven't had great seasons. They're great players. Yeah. But maybe they could change the way the rest of their season goes through a good tournament here.
I love the vibe of this event right now. We're not there yet. We'll eventually get there. Our plan is, weather permitting, get there on Friday in time for Team USA on Saturday. But I'm told that no one would be surprised that Montreal is hosting a terrific event. I'm speaking more from the perspective of what I'm hearing from the players. And when I hear Matthew Tkachuk talk about how it feels like it's the Stanley Cup final all over again. Well, if that's true, then buckle up as a fan, because we are in for next level hockey. I mean, you cannot assemble the teams that Canada, the United States have, Sweden we've already talked about. You can't assemble these 4 nations and the rosters they have and not be highly entertained. I mean, unfortunately, there's going to be some losers, and obviously from a Canadian perspective, you hope that it comes all the way down to the wire at the Garden in Boston. But the level of hockey is going to be super competitive. And a week ago, we were wondering whether or not that was going to be the case. And now that the players are there, it sure sounds like they're invested. They're committed.
Think there'll be a fight in this tournament, Dregs?
I don't. I mean, the game isn't played that way anymore. Certainly not. Ray Ferraro was talking about this, and Noodles, you for sure would remember it. AK's a little bit younger. You go back to 96, and the battle, I think it was 96, the battle that Keith Tkachuk and Adam Foote had.
Yeah.
And it ended with Keith Tkachuk, the father, two-handing Adam Foote in the back. I mean, we're not going to see any of that, but I think that the emotion and the investment will come in different ways, right? We're going to see plays made. We're going to see a level of skating and execution, hopefully, that maybe we've never seen before. But I don't think we'll see a fight.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes down to it, you are going to see, and I think that's the biggest concern a lot of us were having, maybe a month out or whatever. I'll be honest, my level of interest was about 20% for the last year talking about this, going, all right, because we're saying, best on best, and I'm like, okay, well, Draisaitl, Kucherov, you're not getting those. And now I have to be honest, I'm at 80 and I can be coaxed right up to 95 to 100 here. Yeah. Like it's somehow built. I wasn't initially on board. Now I am, because I can't wait to see what happens. I hope it doesn't disappoint to the point where I don't think it's going to be a no-hitter. I don't think it's going to be a glorified all-star game. I just want to see what level it gets to as far as intensity, where guys are playing for keeps.
Yeah. TSN hockey insider Darren Dreger in studio with us. Mitch Marner playing on a line with Connor McDavid, Sam Reinhart, Canada's top line. What do you think this tournament means for Mitch Marner and his reputation? Not that it's lacking around the NHL at all, but these are big games. He's on the top line with the best player in the world. What do you think Mitch Marner can do here in this tournament, Dregs?
Well, look, I mean, the expectation is no different than the Crosby-McKinnon line. When you have that talent on one line, it's got to find a way to contribute. I mean, Reinhart is an absolute gamer. You know he can shoot the puck. It's going to be interesting, the dynamic for me between McDavid and Mitch Marner. You know, both guys like to make plays, right? So is there going to be enough of a puck for all of these great players? And that includes Mitch Marner. And when things get tight, the critics of Mitch Marner will bring that out in the playoffs, right? When there's not as much room, there's not as much time and space out there, does he create opportunity as much as you'd like him to see? Well, that hasn't been the case in the Stanley Cup playoffs. So now internationally, what does that look like? And look, I always look at the games within the games. Special teams for sure are going to be a deciding factor in the outcome. I don't know how many penalties we're going to see. We don't know really how the games are going to be called. We're going to find that out tonight. But what about the matchup game, right? I suspect you're going to see Hedman and Brodin match up against Marner, McDavid, and Reinhart. But how long do you go with that? And then you allow the McKinnon line with Crosby and Stone to maybe run a little bit. And the third line for Canada looks pretty good. And the fourth line for Canada with Konechny on it looks pretty good. So I'm curious about the chemistry and whether or not that's going to develop right out of the gate between Marner and Connor McDavid. That's what I'm most interested in going into tonight.
Well, I wanted to add on to this, and I'm a little bit concerned about this, guys, where the deferring. And what I mean by this is, Sidney Crosby is the godfather, right? And, you're playing with Sid, and Nate's going in on a 2-on-1 with Sidney, and he's got a clear lane to the net, but he's got to get the puck to his body. Got to get to the puck. Like, to me, I want to see, and you know what it's going to be like. Early on, Marner's going to try and overpass and find McDavid. Yeah. Like these guys, they're excited to play together, but you also have to identify you're trying to win a game. So there's a fine line. Sometimes you do need to be selfish. Yeah. You do need to take that shot or make the play. And I feel like when you have these games, especially early on, you've got guys overpassing, overlooking.
Guaranteed.
I watched the power play breakout earlier for Canada, and it was Makar skating it up, dropping it back to McKinnon, who skates it up, dropping it back to McDavid. I'm like, just get over the line. Like, I mean, it's too much. So I wonder, is there going to be a fine line as to, hey, we're here for business, but we also want to, not be selfish and help my line mates out. That to me is going to be an interesting storyline.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be great. I mean, we're about to see a couple hours away from having Crosby and McKinnon and McDavid play on the same team for the first time.
Yeah.
And this is unprecedented. It's something that's never happened before. It's something we've been clamoring for forever. And the unfortunate situation around COVID and the last time they were supposed to do the Olympics, and that, of course, didn't happen. And we're finally seeing it. And I totally understand, Dregs, that people are taking shots at the tournament, that Russia's not in it. And you mentioned Draisaitl and David Pastrnak, but I don't care. Like I'm a Canadian hockey fan, and for me, these are the best sporting events there are. I think back to my days in university. I was talking about it earlier. 2010, the Golden Goal.
Yeah.
All those. I remember that game against Russia. I was supposed to see a Wilco concert. I'm like, I'm not going to Wilco. I want to see Canada play Russia.
Yeah, but that is best on best.
Yeah, no, you're right. But still seeing Canada's best play against whoever else is best. And I get the tournament is lacking in that regard. But I'm not complaining because we've been deprived of it for so long.
Yeah, no, and look, we should have best on best in the foreseeable future, right? You've got the Olympic Games right around the corner. There's no guarantee that Russia won't be included. The IOC has to make that determination. It wouldn't handicap it in favor of Russia returning. But the other nations are going to be represented. And then beyond that, you've got the World Cup of Hockey. So it's on the radar. I mean, the four nations face off. I mean, let's call it what it is. It's a fabricated event. It's a made-for-hockey event by the NHL and the Players Association. But the quality is going to be superb.
Yeah.
The caliber is going to be off the charts. And it does jumpstart the international calendar. Nobody at the NHL head office or Players Association is trying to make this into the next best thing to the Olympics. It's not that. But it's going to be terrific.
And if there was an Olympic Games a couple of years ago, this tournament wouldn't be nearly as important to us.
Right.
Because, again, 2016, the World Cup of Hockey that happened in Toronto, that had Team Europe and whatever, the Young
North
Guns,
America.
Team North America. Like, this is a different beast. And we're looking back really at 2014 since the last time we saw best on best. Back in Sochi. Again, 2014 was a long time ago. Yeah. And we're fortunate enough to see it again. Darren Dreger's in studio. NHL-wise, is there any conversation about trades or maneuvering, or is the focus still on the four nations for everybody involved?
No, I mean, look, all NHL general managers who aren't involved in the four nations are focused on their clubs, right? And probably picking up conversations that they've had to this point, on available players, things that they might want to do before March 7th and all of that. So it's a bit of a reset, but I think it's going to be interesting coming out of the four nations. And as we've established, I mean, there are no restrictions. You could see a trade during the four nations face-off. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a trade. I would be surprised if we saw a player off of four nations roster traded. I mean, you're talking about high rent district stuff there. But no, there's a lot of work that's being done behind the scenes, and I do think that that's going to lead to a good amount of activity as soon as the four nations is over. I do, because I think that the managers sitting on their hands, waiting, eager, recognizing you're going in the final leg of the regular season, then the playoffs. We got to get after it here. So probably a lot of conversations taking place now.
So, Dregs, is there a team that you as an insider would keep your eye on? I mean, obviously there are teams that are hovering around that playoff picture, and they've got to make decisions whether they're going to go all in or kind of maybe retool with some young guys and still see if they can make the playoffs. But, it comes to mind maybe a team like Buffalo. Is there lots of smoke around them just based on some of the players that they do have and maybe a direction Kevin Adams wants to take them?
Yeah, that's fair. And it feels like we've been talking about the Buffalo Sabres and who might be available, who's likely going to get traded all year long, right? And that stems back to the early season speculation around the Vancouver Canucks and, whether or not they were trying to pry Dylan Cousins and Bo Byram out of the Buffalo Sabres. It just doesn't feel like that scenario has faded away entirely. And look, every time I check in with Kevin Adams, I get the same message. They can't close a door in Buffalo. You can come up with a couple of untouchables, but Adams still has to listen because that's the state of his organization. As for teams that I'm watching, Noodles, I mean, I'm looking at the Toronto Maple Leafs. I am. And it's because you can see the needs in Toronto. They're a really good team. There's no doubt about that. But I don't remember the East being as open as it is right now for a long, long time. And you look at the Carolina Hurricanes, absolutely rocked everyone's world when they acquired Mikko Rantanen. And Carolina's probably not done yet. So, what do the chairs that are going to get moved in the East look like? Toronto has to bring in a centerman. Who's the best affordable piece? And by affordable, I'm talking about both from, giving up the assets required, and then you're always going to wrestle with the salary cap until the playoffs start. And, Vancouver's looking for a center, and on it goes. But I'd put Toronto pretty high on the list of teams that I'm intrigued by and what they're going to do.
Darren, you use the term affordable piece. The Leafs don't have a first-round pick this year, but they do have their first next year, have some prospects, guys like Easton Cowan, Fraser Minton, who I'm sure are well-regarded around the NHL.
Danforth is a defenseman.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, do you think anything is on the table when it comes to the Leafs and parting with potentially any and all those guys?
I think that it would have to be a supreme package. I do. And and I love the possibility of a Braden Shen being available. I mean, automatically, I mentioned Toronto would have interest. Well, there's no shortage of teams that would be interested in the captain of the St. Louis Blues, and that was the process that Doug Armstrong, why it was initiated. Let's see what's available out there. I think Toronto would give up a couple of young pieces to get it, because now you're getting a little bit of cost certainty in Shen too.
Yep.
He's not an expiring contract. He's a 6.5 annual average salary. Age dynamic, he ticks a lot of boxes, but you've got to take that information and what the ask is, and to Brad Treliving, the ask is probably going to be really high, maybe too high. And then you measure that versus, okay, well, what's Scott Laughton going to cost, from the Philadelphia Flyers? And every time I check in with Flyers management, they're going to hold out as long as they can for a first-round draft pick. That's what they want for Scott Laughton or something like that. So the prices probably aren't coming down until you get closer to March 7th.
Yeah, it's not that far away. What's today, the 12th of February? So we're getting close. Once the Four Nations ends, we're
right a month. Yeah.
Just a couple of weeks away.
Don't you think also, though, Dregs, they know that they covet Easton Cowan. They know that Fraser Minton. Like, those are the young players that are in the pipeline for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and it'd be hard pressed to let them go. But it depends on what the return is. I mean, that's the biggest challenge, right?
It is. But Noodles, you guys talk enough about this on OverDrive. But again, in covering the Leafs as closely as we do, it feels like the window, it's not closing, but every year it closes a little bit, right? You've got Marner as a pending unrestricted free agent. You're looking around the East, as I've established earlier. The light looks pretty green. What are you saving all the pieces for? And that's easy for me to say sitting in this chair. I'm not the general manager. But look, I mean, the organization, including ownership, everyone involved with the Toronto Maple Leafs is looking at this roster and going, hey, this might be the year.
Yeah.
This might be the year. So let's make sure that we're flipping every stone over to make sure that we're not second-guessing ourselves after the trade deadline and wondering, well, maybe we should have thrown in that piece to get a little better center than the one that we acquired. I mean, that's the dialogue and the talks that are happening now.
Couple Leafs in action tonight. Marner for Canada, Nylander for Sweden. Darren, thank you for doing this. Can you give us a little weather report outside? What's going on?
It wasn't bad as I drove in about an hour or so ago. But, yeah, I mean, according to the forecast, it's not going to be great driving home tonight.
No, we'll not.
I got my snowblower gassed up.
You know what you're doing. You're a Western
buddy.
Canadian boy. You're not concerned by a little bit of snow.
Just hit 4x4 and away we go.
This is nothing for you, man.
This is a joke.
Drive right through this.
Yeah, exactly. You can see Darren on the 401 later tonight and on TSN as well. Thank you for this. That's
Thanks,
TSN
guys.
hockey insider Darren Dreger. Paul Jones coming up on the show. Today is the 25-year anniversary of Vince Carter and the dunk contest, which is crazy. It makes me feel very old, but it's a reality. The Raptors host the Cavaliers as well on TSN 1050. Jonesy will have the call, and he'll join us next here on Overdrive. The third hour of Overdrive continues here on this Wednesday evening. Aaron Korolnek in for Hayes. Noodles is here. We'll welcome Paul Jones, the voice of the Raptors, to the show in just a moment. Down at Scotiabank Arena tonight, the Raptors celebrating the 25th anniversary of Vince Carter's iconic slam dunk contest win 25 years ago, which, again, It's just incredible. We were talking about iconic sports moments, Noodles, and we talked about the Jose Batista bat flip, and here it is up on TSN2. Of course, you had the Kenny Smith, "It's over," associated with it that people still reference today. It's a very common meme on Twitter, but just an incredible performance by Vince Carter that night, and incredible performance by the Raptors last night. They beat the Sixers 106-103. Scotty Barnes was a beast for Toronto. Let's welcome in the voice of the Raptors, our friend Paul Jones here on Overdrive. Jonesy, what's up?
I'm good, AK. And like, this is like, Hayes isn't there, so it's like the substitute teacher taking over.
That's it.
And the class, Noodles, the class is like swinging from the lights, right?
Nah,
like,
come on.
O-Dogs, I
Come
hear
on,
O-Dogs.
we're all good. We're all
O-Dogs
good.
dipped out now, like on me. Like I get the last minute invite, like it's like rolling the TV in. And put on
rolling the TV in, the good old days right there. When that TV was rolled in, nothing
that TV
better.
rolled in, you knew your teacher had a tough night the night before, right? Like there's a movie.
That's exactly it. So 25 years ago, I know you were there that night, Jonesy. What do you remember most about 2000 and what Vince Carter did that night?
Well, a couple things come to mind. First of all, you can bust your boy Duthie, our boy Duthie, with this. Before they made him king of the NHL in the quiz show, he actually slummed it with us working on basketball.
Wow.
And Duthie and Routens and legendary head coach Brian Heaney were on the panel up top. And I was the courtside guy, and I was interviewing Vince in the bowels on a door just outside the arena, like where in the basement where it opened and went out onto the floor. And we did the interview. And it was all done, and I was getting the wrap-up sign from Dave Haggett, the PR guy, like, hurry up, because Vince, like, the car that he came to the arena in was in an accident, or there was an accident holding it up, and he couldn't get out on the floor to warm up, and he hadn't had a warm-up yet, and, like, I mean, there were some good dunkers in that thing. Stackhouse, McGrady, who else was in that?
Steve Francis. Yeah.
Like, it was like I was – so – the interview ends, Aaron, Noodles, the interview ends, and I look at Vince, I go, this is you, man. V, this is you. It's got you written all over it. And he's like, oh, I don't know, Jonesy. And now I know it was because he probably didn't get to warm up, and, you know, Stackhouse and Francis and McGrady and all those guys were out there waiting for him. And I said, you got this, man. This is you. Just go to town. And he was kind of, I don't know. And you know in the Ten Commandments when Charlton Heston as Moses sees God and his face transforms? Vince opened the door and left the interview and walked out into the lights of the arena, and he became a new dude. Like, he went off. I mean, Isaiah Thomas was jumping over the table as a judge with his arms up in the air, like just the stuff that he had never seen before from Vince. I was sitting beside the late Paul Silas, who was the coach, I think, in either Charlotte or Cleveland at the time, and Dave Winfield. They were sitting in my section.
Wow.
And when Vince did that dunk, I mean, I've seen a lot of basketball. I've been around this game since 1970 when I was like a preteen. And it takes a lot to move my backside from my chair. And I got up and I looked around, and there were other basketball people looking around going, did I just see that? And yeah, the Kenny Smith, it's over, and Isaiah jumping over the table. I'm like, man, give him the trophy now. Like, don't even bother. Just everybody else sit down and let him do all his dunks. I mean, guys are still doing those dunks today.
Yep.
Between the legs and, like, they're still doing them today. And the one that got me, Aaron and Noodles, was the last one where he went up and he put his arm in the basket. Like, I thought about that. You know how high you have to be to, like put something, like push something down on a chair, like to be up that high, to not dunk it down, to actually ram it in the basket. And we got back, and Butch Carter goes, and I'm watching my star player swinging from the rim with his elbow. It was an unbelievable dunk contest, and it was huge because they're trying to revive the image of the NBA after that nasty lockout the year before. So it was a huge night.
Paul Jones, the voice of the Raptors, is our guest. The Raptors play Cleveland tonight down at Scotiabank Arena. Toronto is celebrating the 25th anniversary of Vince Carter's iconic 2000 NBA dunk contest performance. And Jonesy, I'm curious, you were there with Vince before, and a lot of people will point to that dunk contest really elevating Vince Carter's profile internationally. What was it like after, and in the weeks and months that came after the incredible performance?
Well, I tell you, about 2 weeks after that, Aaron, NBC changed its national TV game to a Sunday afternoon, Toronto and Phoenix, and not letting them down. Your boy Vince went off for 51 against Phoenix, and I'm telling you, it was like watching a high schooler beat up on everybody. His headband was crooked, his shirt tail was hanging out, he was hitting shots from like out on Yonge Street. It was crazy, and it did, Aaron, push his star forward. Because you think about it, after that, Vince Carter led the All-Star game in balloting. And I say this all the time. He wasn't in New York. He wasn't in Los Angeles. He wasn't in Chicago. He was not in a major U.S. market. And there was none of this internet voting. You had to bring your butt to an arena and punch the little hole in the ballot and put it in the box. And there was none of this, today the ballot's worth 3 or whatever. So think about that. Put that into a little bit of perspective. He led the NBA in all-star voting from Toronto. So, wow. Yeah, if that didn't catapult his star, I'm not sure what did.
So Brandon Ingram gets introduced to the media today. How do you think he's going to fit in?
I like the fit, Noodles. I think you got I think you have a situation where, and I've been saying this all along, the Raptors in Tampa, they hit the skids, and they got Scotty Barnes as the number 4 picked in the draft when they should have had 7. So all those people that want to tank for the number 1 pick, it's not a sure thing. And they went from 4th pick in the draft to number 5 seed the next year. This team has the same kind of potential. They don't have as experienced players, Noodles. Like there's no championship left over with an OG or a Pascal or a Fred or anybody like that. But they've got some. Ingram was an all-star. He's been an all-star. Scotty's been an all-star. So you've got the pieces, and I think he's going to be a good fit. He's a killer in the mid-range, moves the ball well. Look, the guy was an all-star, and he's only 27. So he signed for less than max, which means you might have a little money to spend. Maybe you're not pushing up against the tax. It's all roses right now.
Well, how about a little boost from R.J. Barrett, who's going to be back tonight as well?
R.J.'s he's a certified competitor. You know those guys that when you're playing hockey, Noodles, and it's like 9-1 and there's only a minute to go and the guy's still out there going all out like he's going to get like this next goal is worth 9 and I'm going to win, right? Like that's RJ. He's got some dog in him. He's a competitor and he loves to hoop. He loves to play. He loves being in Toronto. You think about that young core with Ingram, Barnes, Quickly, Barrett. And then you look, and coming off the bench, you have like an Abaji, Grady, Mobo. Yeah. You start Pirtle as a big guy, Jacoby Walter. I just like what this team has going forward.
Paul Jones, our guest, the voice of the Raptors, Cleveland, here on TSN 1050 tonight. I think everybody likes what the Raptors have going forward. But I think there's a lot of Raptors fans, Jones, and I'm sure you've heard about this, that are concerned about this team this season, perhaps bringing Ingram back. Oh, look, Brandon Ingram's playing 35 minutes for you and helping you win ball games, when in reality, probably the best course of action for this year's Toronto Raptors is to have as many lottery balls as possible. And that win last night against Philadelphia probably didn't do the Raptors any favors. Where do you stand on that conflict?
I'm never for the tank, Aaron.
Okay.
I'm not. And the competitor in me, maybe it's to my detriment, but I just think you look better when you win. Your assets look better. A guy that people might be thinking about, he looks better when the team is playing better and the team is winning. Listen, there's no guarantee. Ask the Detroit Pistons that had the worst record 3 years in a row and twice dropped as far as you could fall down to 5. And I've talked to Dwayne Casey about that. They thought they were going to get Victor Wembanyama, and they didn't. Right? And I think, guys, you have to have these guys playing together to develop a little bit of chemistry. It can't all be in July and August in summer league and off-season workouts. There's nothing like a game. There's nothing like, being able to do it when there's butts in the seats and the popcorn smells up the arena. Like, you've got to develop some chemistry. And let's face it, guys, they're going to lose some games. Like, they have 2 guys on this roster over 30. Their rookies have more minutes than any other rookies in the NBA, save for 2 teams. So, for the people that want the tank to keep rolling, it's not like they may intentionally do it, but they have the toughest schedule in February. They have one of the youngest teams in the NBA. So you're taking some losses. So don't worry about lottery balls. They're going to come your way. I think you need to do enough and win enough so that guys don't get disgruntled. Like, a guy like Scotty, who's been here 4 or 5 years. He saw the playoffs in his first year. He wants to win, because if that doesn't happen, then he says quietly, all right, I got my money. Get me out of here.
Jonesy, I think perhaps the most interesting storyline around the NBA right now is what's going on with the Lakers, with Luka Doncic, and conversely the Mavericks, who are kicking people out of their stadium for mouthing "Fire Nico," their GM. I mean, it's an unbelievable scene there in Dallas, where seemingly every Mavericks fan is on the verge of becoming a fan of a new team. Are you more intrigued by what happens with Luka and LeBron going forward, or what happens with the Mavericks going forward?
Both of them, Aaron. I'm looking at both of them. Luka and LeBron are going to have to coexist. I'm not sure they look good now, but, when you're playing the Utah Jazz, as my dad used to say as a boxer, you look good hitting the bag. The problem is the bag doesn't hit back, right? Like, let's see what happens when they get the good teams and they're into, they're into the playoffs. And then Dallas, I liked the acquisition of Anthony Davis. I did like that, but in typical Anthony Davis fashion, I always tease he leads the league in MRIs. Like, wow. He's great in his first game and then gets hurt. Like, is there anything more fitting than that? Listen, I like the move for both teams, and you guys know, Noodles, you know this.
Yeah.
People say, how can you trade Luka? They see stuff that we don't. The locker room, work habits, things that they've asked for that are not being done. Like, there's a business side to this. They probably save $120 million not having to pay him a supermax. There's so many variables involved. So it'll be interesting to see how it all shakes down. Dallas is in win right now mode, though, and the Lakers are set for another 10 years with Luka.
Jonesy, just a quick follow-up on Davis. Is it a tough nickname? I know that's not his nickname, but is it a tough nickname to be kind of named by Barkley Street Clothes? I mean, that's kind of a damn thing. And you said it leads the league in MRIs. I mean, the truth doesn't lie there. The stats don't lie. I mean, this guy's banged up a lot, but that's a tough nickname to have, isn't it?
It is, Noodles, and you're trying to do everything to defy it, right? You're trying to do everything, to beat it. Like red light Rasico. Like, just if he could put a whole block in front of the net to prevent the red light from going on, he'd do it, right? So it is tough. And look, all you can do as an athlete is go out there and do your best. I like him as a player, AD. I really do. The problem is, availability. What do they say? The best ability is availability.
Yes. Very much so. And we're thrilled you were available to join us today, Jonesy, on the
always
substitute teacher edition of OverDrive, as you termed it.
I'm in. Yeah. When the substitute teacher's there, I get to it's what do they call it? I used to call it when I was playing ball, I was a 30-30 man. They said, what? 30 points, 30 rebounds? I said, hell no. We had to be up 30 or down 30 before I went in the game.
Oh, come on. Don't sell yourself short. You're a starter. You're always a starter here on TSN 1050. And we'll be listening tonight. Raptors and Cavaliers. Jonesy on the call. Thank you for doing this.
All right, guys. Pleasure.
Paul Jones. I think Jonesy used to be like a principal or something too back in the day.
I think I've talked to him about that. I do believe he has an education background.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure I've had some good conversations with him in studio. He's a great man.
Oh, he's the man.
Love
he's
him.
the man. It's a great call. Down the bottom of the well. That's his call for the three-pointers. I love it. I love listening to Jonesy call a game, and I will be listening on my drive home. That could very well take a very long time tonight. So Canada, Sweden, 8 o'clock. Raptors, Cavaliers at 7:30. And Doogie's best bets to wrap up a very a very busy edition of Overdrive coming up to close out today's show. All right, our final segment here on the Wednesday evening edition of Overdrive. Korolnek McLennan taking it home, and Noodles Doogie was very excited during the commercial break. He let me know that yesterday he won his best bets powered by FanDuel. So he's going to take another run at a set of winners. I was very impressed. Today's best bets powered by FanDuel. Make your picks and assemble a same-game parlay in seconds on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Doogie, take it away.
All right, boys. International Best on Best is back, and we want to land another best bet for this evening. So we're going to roll with Canada on the money line. Let's pair that with Connor McDavid, 3+ shots. William Nylander, 3+ shots. A lot of Swedish players talking about how integral he is and important he is to that team. And Sidney Crosby back, putting Canada on that jersey. I like Crosby, 1+ point. That parlay totals plus 552 on the FanDuel Sportsbook app.
Oh, I love it. I'm so in.
Talking about
I'm
there?
so
Like,
in.
you're like, what is he saying? Like putting that on the back and all. Like, I think you lost your train of thought. Did you do?
No, Doogie was good.
Not a chance.
He's just so focused in on making money for the audience that some of the words may have gone in a different direction.
So excited.
He
love
is excited. I love Doogie. He's perhaps the sweetest guy I've ever met. What a total mensch. I love Doogie. Today's best bets powered by FanDuel. Live same-game parlays are now available for every Four Nations face-off game on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Please play responsibly. 19+ and physically located in Ontario. So, weather's not great, but who cares? Because we've got hockey tonight. We've got hoops tonight. Canada, Sweden. What type of game are you expecting between these two tonight, Jamie?
Well, I for some reason, I keep thinking it's going to be like a 3-2 game, like a tight game. I think Sweden knows how to play, especially international hockey. These guys all know each other. You heard, Doogie talking about William Nylander. Nylander, is he going to be a difference maker for the Swedes? That being said, I feel like McDavid's going to be shot out of rocket, like out of a cannon. Like he will be flying tonight. So maybe I'm going to be wrong, but I is there an under and over? I feel like it might be 3-2, 4-2.
Yeah, 5.5.
Okay,
right on your number. So you nailed
there.
it. You nailed it. Yeah, I'm totally with you. I think it's going to be a very close game, and maybe we see overtime. Who knows? Wouldn't that be something?
Okay,
Four
so
Nations.
We got to get up to speed on that, though. Is overtime 3-on-3? Is there a shootout? Is there?
I believe, and Doogie, maybe you want to look into this. Overtime
Yes.
is 10 minutes, 3-on-3, and then they go to a shootout.
Okay.
Is that correct, Doogie? Look at me. I somehow knew that. I don't know where that came from.
But we do have to be up to speed on that
Yes.
because I feel like at least one game in this tournament is going to go to OT. So we got to be know what to expect, right?
Yes. So Bettman, Gary Bettman was speaking moments ago, and he officially announced the 2028 World Cup of Hockey and says that he wants the Olympics and World Cups to follow each other every 2 years consistently, which I think would be fantastic for every hockey fan. Olympics next year, 2026 in Milan. And then you go, look at my Italian pronunciation. I'm sure you're very proud, Jamie.
Yes,
and then,
love it.
And then World Cup 28, Olympics 2030. I don't even know where that is in 2030. But just keep going. 2 years, stagger them.
Yeah.
We need consistent international hockey. We cannot ever be deprived of it again. It's totally unacceptable that it took almost 10 years for it to happen. It's back tonight, and I couldn't be happier.
I agree. I think regardless of how we've come to it, this is the beginning, I hope, of it never stops again. Every 2 years you're going to see some form of, we'll call it best on best, and as other countries add in, and Russia and all of that. But I think it's a good start tonight. So let's see if it's a good game. I'm looking forward to that.
Bettman was asked how much longer he envisions going on as NHL commissioner, and his response was, "Am I looking elderly or something?"
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a reasonable question. It's not like he's 28 years old. Like I believe he's mid to late 60s.
I think even maybe into his 70s. Yeah.
Okay, so you got to look at that. But I thought that was a pretty funny comeback. He's a pretty quick-witted guy. I will say that. So.
Yeah, and I don't know his successor exactly. Would it be Bill Daly, or are they kind of a package deal? I'm not sure exactly how they would proceed. But clearly, the future of the NHL, I mean, there's a lot of positive things happening in the NHL. And Bettman, say what you will about him. And, of course, the lockouts will, of course, be something that we'll always remember with regards to Gary Bettman. But getting international hockey back in this capacity, I think, is something we're all looking forward to. We're done here, Noodles. We'll be back tomorrow evening. See, I'm used to tomorrow morning. Yeah. Tomorrow evening at
4 p.m.
We'll chat then.